Welcome back, CAT 31 CATIA class. We're going over the extra credit assignment, so this is optional. So let's go over this part, the crank, extra credit, and notice the units are in inches. Okay, so we're going to start by first creating the front view. So we'll first create the periphery of the part along with the shaft, or part of the shaft, and this radial elongated hole. And we'll take care of the keyway later on in a separate sketch. And we'll also take care of the pad extrusion of the shaft in a separate sketch. So let's first just get the periphery to take care of the plate portion, and then later on we'll take care of the shaft. Alright, so let's take a look at the front view. So when we start to sketch, we're going to first draw our circle with the diameter 176. Create the radial slot, elongated hole, and then draw around it. And from there we'll create our first pad. Alright, so let's go ahead and start CATIA. Okay, so we're in the wrong workbench, so I'll just close this. Go to Start. Go to Part Design. And let's call this crank. And OK. Alright, let's go ahead and maximize. Take advantage of the entire screen. You also want to maximize, if your CATIA is not maximized, go ahead and maximize it. That way you can see more of the icons, the commands. Alright, so I'm going to start by sketching. First let's check our units. So we're going to go to Tools, Options, General, Parameters and Measure, Units, and the first option is for length, and make sure you are set to inches. Alright, so we're set. So let's go ahead and create our first sketch, and I'll create it on the YZ plane. It doesn't matter which plane. And sketch. Alright, so we are in Sketcher. Now if for some reason your sketch tools disappears on you, you may have accidentally closed it in a previous session. So one thing you can do is always right click on any icon, right click, and look for the sketch tools. Notice there's no check mark, so it's not showing. So once we click on show sketch tools, it'll pop back up. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with our 176 diameter shaft. Okay, so let's go to circle command. And I'm gonna center the shaft and that keyway at the origin, at our horizontal and vertical axis where they intersect, right at the origin at 0, 0. Okay, and I'll just click to create a circle, to generate the circle. Click and space to deselect. Okay, so let's add a diameter to the shaft. Okay, and the shaft has a diameter of 176. Okay, so 176 for the shaft. Now we're not drawing we're not gonna do the pad for the shaft yet. This is just to get the profile, which happens to go around the shaft. Okay, so 176 diameter. Double click, type in 176. Make sure you are set to diameter. Now you can always drop down, go to diameter. Okay, so 176 diameter, and OK. Alright, so let me move the sketch tools out of the way. I can always dock it here on top. Alright, so let me pan. I'm going to hold onto the wheel and move the mouse to pan. Okay, click and space to deselect. Alright, so we're going to draw our profile. But before we do it, I'm going to draw the elongated radial slot. Okay, so here we have the slot. And I want you to notice that this point here on the slot, the center point, is on the vertical axis. Then we have an angle of 30 degrees. And we have a radius of 0.25. And I also want you to notice this dimension here. This dimension will give us the radius of the bottom portion of the slot, which is 375. So 3.75. Okay, so that's this radius here, 3.75. Now to get the radius of the center line of the slot, it's just 375. So that'll give us 375 to the bottom of it, plus the radius of 0.25. So if you add them up, that'll give us 4. So the radius of the center line of the slot is 4 inches. All right, so let's go ahead and create that radial slot. Okay, so we're going to go to the rectangle command, go to the drop down, click on the little downward arrow, and here's the cylindrical elongated hole command. All right, so go ahead and click on it. And I want you to notice that here on the bottom left corner, it's asking us to select the center. So that radial slot is centered about the origin. Okay, so it's centered about the origin. Click. Okay, and then now we're creating our center line, which has a radius of 4. So you'll see up here what radius we're getting as we're pulling inward or outward radially. So as long as we get close enough to 4, we'll be good. But also make sure we're vertical, right? Notice how you see the blue dashed lines? So that's the starting point, and it'll line up with the vertical axis. If we were to go horizontally, notice how it lights up with blue dashes, so it's tracking the horizontal axis, or we're parallel to the horizontal axis. So we're going to go vertical. Okay, so we're going to go vertical and try and get somewhere around 4. It doesn't have to be exact. Click. Okay, so now we go radially about 30 degrees. And I want you to notice that the degrees is up here on the upper right corner. Actually, let me go ahead and pull this sketch tool. So as we're creating our elongated hole, this extends on the sketch tool. So you can see here's our angle. I'm just going to guesstimate, get close enough to 30. And it's a minus 30 because we're going clockwise. Plus 30 degrees is counterclockwise. Okay, so we're going to go clockwise, which is a minus 30 degrees. So we'll get close enough to minus 30 degrees and click. And now it's going to generate the radius. So if you want, you can actually type in the radius if you like. You can type it in or just eyeball it right around 0.25 and click. So now that generates our elongated slot. Let me click in space to deselect. And you can see that radially it generated some construction geometry, right, to help create the slot and also line it up with the center. Okay, so if you didn't notice, our radial center line, construction line, is centered about the origin, and so is the slot. Okay, if we go back to the drawing, this construction center line, which is defined radially by this dimension, 3.75. Notice how it intersects through the origin. Okay, so it's 3.75 from the origin to the center line, 3.75, and then we add, but we also had to add 0.25, right? 0.25 to add it to 375, and that gives us 4. Okay, so that's how we actually came up with 4 inches. So we're going to go ahead and throw in that radius. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the radius on this center line of the slot. Click. And once again, it's 375 plus 0.25, which gives us 4. So let's double click, change this to 4. There it is. And the radius, let's check our radius. Double click on radius. That's 0.25. And OK. Let me click in space to deselect. Now notice everything is green except this arc. So if I was to left mouse click and hold the arc, I can pull on it. So we haven't put any constraints, whether it's a relationship constraint or a dimensional constraint, to lock this arc in place. So what are we missing? What we're missing is the angle. So if we go back to our drawing, we need an angle of 30 degrees. So we're going to draw a construction line from this center point to that center, and then add a 30-degree angle. All right, so let's go ahead and draw that construction line. So we'll draw a line from this center to the origin. Click, and we're going to turn it to a construction element. And click. Then click in space to deselect. Okay, so there's our construction line, which is locked to the center and at the origin. And now we can add an angle from the vertical to our construction line. So let's go ahead and add a dimensional constraint from the vertical axis to our construction line. Position it, and then double click and type in 30. And OK. Notice now everything's green. So let me click in space to deselect. All right, so looks like we're almost there. We're halfway there on this first sketch. Now what we're going to do is draw the profile. And we're going to go around the circle, around the slot. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the drawing. Okay, so we're going to draw the periphery. Notice there's, other than the keyway, there's no straight lines. Everything is radial. Oh, here's a straight line. My mistake. Straight line goes around. All right, so I want you to notice that these arcs are tangent to each other. And here's another arc, tangent. All right, so we're going to start with the straight line. We'll start with the straight line. Create an arc, tangent to our existing circle. Okay, create another arc, another arc, another arc, and so on. Okay, so we're just going to guesstimate the dimensions for now. All right, so let's see if we can use the profile. If it gets too complicated, we may have to do it in sections, like maybe one arc at a time. Let's see if we can use the profile without it getting too messy. So let's go to profile. I'm going to start with the straight line somewhere out here, which actually happens to line up with this radius. So we'll start with the straight line somewhere out here. And one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to turn off construction option. So let's say I forgot and I'll just leave it on. Let's say I forgot. So we're going to draw a line, straight line, starting from this construction radial circle. Okay, so we'll click. Notice how it's creating construction elements. So we need to turn off construction. It'll go to solid. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let me zoom in a little bit. And just guesstimate. I want to make sure I don't accidentally create a constraint. Notice I was trying to create a constraint with the existing geometry. So I'm just going to hover away from any potential constraints. Okay, nothing's lining up. Good, so I'll just click. Okay, now I can create an arc. and we'll make it tangent to this arc or this existing circle if possible. Okay, so there it is. It's generating a coincidence and a tangency. If it doesn't generate a tangency, we can always add a tangency later once we exit the profile command. So click. So let's go tangent arc. So we're going to go around the circle. And I'm just going to guesstimate the location. Really don't know where this arc ends. I'll just guesstimate it somewhere down here, but try and make sure it doesn't generate any undesired construction relationships or dimensions. And click. Then I'm going to go arc again. There it is. You can see. So somewhere out here we have an arc. So we're going to line up with this radial construction element. And click. And we're going to create another arc, tangent to the existing arc. And I'm trying to line it up around this center point, so it actually is centered to this arc. So let me just try and guesstimate the location, see if I can get it. So I'm way off, so I'm just going to let it be. So I'll just go ahead and guesstimate the location and click. And then we have another arc. Okay, so it's not exactly lining up with the slot, but that's okay. We'll come back and fix that. And click, then create another arc and connect it to this one, to this line. It's not coming out tangent, that's okay, we'll fix it, and click. And click and space to deselect. So that's an ugly looking profile, but we can go in and fix it. Now before I do, this circle, which represents the shaft, I'm going to turn this circle into a construction element. There it is. Click and space to deselect. Okay, so we need to line things up. Okay, so first of all, this arc happens to be centered at the origin. This arc happens to be centered about this arc. Same thing with this one, centered with this arc. Okay, so we're going to have to go in there and fix things. Let me first let's see if we can create a tangency here without the profile going crazy. Since the elements are white, they're still free to move, right? So if I was to pull on it, see how it's free to move? So as long as they're white and you're adding constraints, they may do something funny or awkward, like fly all over the place. You can see sometimes elements just go way outside the screen. We can always undo it if it does that. Okay, so let me first try and add a tangency constraint between the arcs. So I'm going to hold on to the control key, arc and line, and add a tangency, see if it doesn't go crazy on us. And it didn't like it, so let me go ahead and cancel that. I'm going to go ahead and cancel it. Alright, so I'm going to have to come back to this one. I'm going to have to delete or come back and recreate this arc. Okay, so let's go to this arc here. When I click on this arc, I'm going to center this point. So let's see if I can grab the point, left mouse click, and center it at the origin. See if it'll... And there it is, it's centered. So as you can see, as I select this arc, you can see the center line up or light up. So it centers here at the origin. It's actually hard to see, but now it's centered. Let's go ahead and give that one a radius. So this has a radius of 4.70, 4.70 with respect to the origin. That's the center. So 4.70. .70 and OK. All right, so now let's try and line up this arc with this one. So as I click on this arc, notice here's the center point. Let me click in space to deselect. So I'm going to see if I can move this center to that center. And it's not locking it to this center point. That's okay. So what I can do is I can put a coincidence constraint, a concentricity constraint between the two arcs. So I'm going to hold on to the control key, select the two arcs, and let's add a concentricity, meaning the two center points are shared. They're on top of each other. And it doesn't like it, right? So let me go ahead and cancel that. So it's fighting some of the other constraints, and I'm guessing it's going to be this one here. So notice how this point here rides along this center line, this construction center line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this one. And I'm going to delete this constraint. Delete it. See if it's free to move now. Okay, so I'm going to try it again. I'm going to hold on to the control key, click on the arc, click on this arc. I can let go of the control key now, and that's it. Try and add again a concentricity, and this time it worked. Okay, so that constraint we deleted earlier was actually giving us problems. So okay, so same thing with this one. So earlier when I said, hey, let's start this line on this construction line, that was a mistake. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this constraint so that this endpoint is not fixed to this construction radial element. So I'm going to delete that. Right click delete, or just hit delete on the keyboard. There it is. All right, so let's make this arc, hold on to the control key, and this arc, make them concentric to each other so they share the same center point. And it worked. Okay. Okay, now we can try and make these tangent. Yeah, so that earlier coincidence constraint was giving us problems. So that was a mistake on my part. So I'm going to hold on to the control key, select the arc and the line, and give it a tangency. I can let go of the control key now. Let's give it a tangency constraint, and there it is. And okay. All right, we're almost there. So we see a lot of green. Okay, so now we can add radii to the arcs. Okay, let's go with this one first. So this has a radius of 5. Let's go ahead and add that. Now the center of this arc is somewhere way out here in space. It actually doesn't line up with the origin. Okay, so let's double click and change this to 5. Enter. There it is. Now let's add a radius to this arc. 0.88. Okay, so 0.88. Okay, so let's add a radius to this arc. Double click and we type in 0.88. Enter. Okay, so there's that radius. Notice here's its center. Its center doesn't line up with the origin, right? Somewhere out here. Okay, so it's still white. So let me grab onto this white. I'm going to left mouse click and hold and slightly move it. So there's something that we need to lock this line and also the arc, right, into place so it turns green. So we're missing something. So let me click in space to deselect. Let's take a look at the drawing. Okay, so we got the 470, we got the 375, this 0.63 is for the keyway. The only thing I can think of is that, oh, here it is. difficult to see, so let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, I couldn't figure out what was locking this straight line. And if you see, there's this extension line, almost like an extension line you see on a dimension. So it's basically telling us that it's tangent to the keyway. Okay, so we're gonna have to draw this circle as a construction element, and then we're gonna create a tangency constraint between this construction circle of the keyway and this straight line. Okay, so that's what it is. So let's go back. Yeah, so this line, we need to lock it in tangentially to the keyway circle. So let's go ahead and draw that circle of the keyway, and we'll draw it as a construction element. So click on it, circle command, go to the origin, and that's what we want. We want a construction element. Okay, and click in space. Okay, so we have our construction circle representing the keyway. Notice construction is on. If it's solid, you can always select the circle and turn it into a construction element. Okay, so let me deselect, and let's go get that diameter of 1 inch. So okay, the circle of the keyway has a diameter of 1. So let's add that 1 inch diameter to the keyway circle. Double click, type in 1 and enter. Okay, so now we can make this line tangent to this circle. Make sure it's tangent to the right side and not the left side. Okay, so notice we can move this, move it over. Okay, so I'm gonna guesstimate the location. There it is. Hold on to the control key, select the small circle. Okay, I already have the line selected, so I can let go of the control key now. And let's add a tangency. So in 3, 2, 1, don't blink. And notice it added a tangency between the line and the circle. And okay. So I click in space and everything's green. Everything looks good, right? All right, so let's go ahead and do a tool sketch analysis. Tools, sketch analysis. And everything's closed. If it's not closed, you're gonna see those blue cyan double circles. So you would have to go in there and fix things. And we're good. We have the closed elongated slot, and we have our closed profile. Let's go ahead and close this. And again, note that this is a construction circle representing the shaft, and this is a construction circle representing the keyway hole. All right, so we're ready to exit and create a pad. Let's go ahead and exit the sketch. Notice the construction lines don't show up. So once you exit a sketch, click in space to deselect. Construction lines, like the radial center line, the keyway circle, and the circle representing the shaft, don't show up when you exit the sketch. If you double click on the sketch, you'll be able to see the construction lines, but they're not part of the final profile. Okay, so we can go ahead and exit. All right, so let's hit the plus sign here just so you can see when we create our pad. It'll add the pad to our branch for the part body. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to pad. Actually, before I do, let me get the thickness. Okay, so what's that thickness of the plate? It's 0.50. So here on the right side view, we can see 0.50. All right, so let's go ahead and do a pad of the sketch. We can select it directly on the model or here from the tree. Notice how it tucks in the sketch underneath the pad. Okay, so we have 0.50. Type in 0.50 and okay. And there's our plate. Okay, so I'm holding on to the wheel and the right button to rotate. You can always go to isometric view. By the way, if you want to look at it from different perspectives, you can always go to this downward and pick, let's say, front view, top view, and so on. If you want, you can always take this sub toolbar, grab it by the handle and pull it outward. Hey, maybe you want to put it up here. So that way you can always easily access the different perspective views, as you can see. All right, so, and that's the reason I also chose the YZ plane, is so that when I go to perspective, my part is standing upright. Okay, so notice Z is always going upward, the Z axis. All right, so let's go ahead and create now a sketch for the shaft. Okay, so we're going to create a sketch for the shaft, and then we'll create a separate sketch for the keyway. So we're going to create a sketch for the shaft, then we're going to do a pad. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so if we want, we can actually sketch on the surface or sketch on a plane. I prefer the plane, but it's okay if we do it on the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch on the surface. Go to sketch. Okay, so now what we can do is we can project this edge. Okay, we can project the edge. So originally when we created the profile, we created the diameter of the shaft, right? So we can borrow this edge and we can project it. Okay, so here's the project command. If you don't see project, we can always go to insert, operations, 3D geometry, and project, and OK, and click and space to deselect. Anytime you project something, it comes in as in the color yellow. Okay, so you don't have to darken the background. I'm going to slightly darken the background just so we can see the yellow construction line that we projected over. There it is. So I'm going to take this yellow projected line and actually turn it into a construction line. I misspoke earlier, so let's turn it into a construction element. Click and space. And I'm going to create a circle with the exact same diameter of this arc that we projected over. Okay, so we're going to create a circle to represent the shaft. Click on circle command. Go to the origin. And we don't want it to be a construction element, so we need to turn off construction. There it is, solid. And we just have to lock it in to the existing yellow construction line. Click, and then click in space. And notice it's locked onto that construction arc. Here's the constraint it created. So if I was to delete that constraint and delete it, it's no longer locked. I'm trying to increase the radius. So we're actually free to change the radius, right? Or diameter. So if you want, you can type in 176, but I just wanted to show you that it was already locked before. We didn't have to worry about the diameter. So I can just go to undo a few times. Undo, undo. Click in space. Need to undo a few more times. And there it is, it's green. Okay, so it's locked. As you can see by this coincidence constraint, it's locked to the radial construction line. All right, so or you could have done it the hard way and just draw a circle at 176, which is also actually kind of quick. So let's go ahead and exit now. But let me do a tool sketch analysis. Make sure everything's good. Everything's closed. There's nothing open. Okay, I can close this. Exit. And let's do a pad. So it's a pad of 163 inches, but we already have the thickness of 0.50. So we're going to go 1.63 minus 50 to do our pad. Okay, so there's that 0.50. Okay, so we're going to do a pad of that sketch. Click and space to deselect. So let's do pad of sketch 2. And I'm going to left mouse click inside this window and hold. Now I'm going to type in 1.63 minus the thickness 0.50 and OK. Or I can hit preview. There it is. And OK. And just as a sanity check, we can always go back and take a measurement. So I can use my measuring tape, measure from surface to surface just to see that it's 163. Okay, I can cancel away from that calipers or measuring tool. All right, so now we already have our cutout for the radial elongated slot. We have our shaft, we have the plate. All we're missing now is the keyway. Okay, so let's go back. And we're going to create a sketch on that shaft. And we're going to do it by creating the circle with a diameter of 1. And then we'll draw the rectangular key. Alright, so let's go ahead and create that 1-inch diameter circle in a new sketch. Okay, so I'm going to create a sketch on this surface. We can also do it on the back surface. It doesn't matter. Create a sketch. And let me zoom in here a little bit. Alright, so we're going to now create a circle at the origin. And we're going to give it a diameter of 1 inch. Okay, and I'm going to darken the background. You don't have to do this. I'm going to darken the background just to hide just to use low light so we can easily see our sketch. There it is. I'm going to darken the background. You don't have to do this part. Alright, so I need to create the keyway. Okay, so here's the keyway, and it's given us a length of 0.63 from the center to the top of the keyway, and then the keyway has a width of 0.25. Okay, so 0.63 and 0.25. That'll give us our keyway. So let's go back. Alright, so I'm going to create our keyway using the profile command. Okay. So I'm just going to guesstimate the location of the keyway, but definitely you want to make sure you're locked onto the circle. Now, I prefer to have object snap turned off. Notice how object snap, my mistake, snap to point, meaning it'll snap to any point on the grid. I prefer to have it off, so it's kind of hard to click on the circle when it's snapping all over the grid, so I prefer to turn it off. That's optional. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the arc to start my keyway. Go up, cross, and then make sure it lands right on the circle and click, and we're done. So we can turn off the profile command. Okay, so let me click in space to deselect. Okay, so before I add my dimensions, I'm going to make this vertical and this vertical symmetrical about the vertical axis. So I'm going to hold on to the control key. First select the vertical lines while holding on to the control key. And then the last element you pick is the line of symmetry. So always pick the line of symmetry last. So our line of symmetry will be the vertical axis. Select it. Last, obviously. Let go of the control key now. Go to relationships and add symmetry, and watch how the lines will line up with respect to the vertical axis. And there it is. And OK. So we have the symmetry constraints, as you can see. So if I was to slightly pull on this vertical line, you can see the other one will stay symmetrical about the vertical axis. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add our dimensions. So let me click in space to deselect. So we have a dimension of 0.63 vertically, 0.63. from the origin, or you can pick the horizontal axis to this horizontal line and click to position it. Double click. It's 0.63 and OK. Click and space to deselect. Then we're going to add a width. Click on dimensional constraint. We can go vertical to vertical, or we can just simply select the horizontal. Click. And let's double click and add a 0.25 width and enter. And we're almost there. So let's click and space to deselect. Okay, so one of the things you should do is do a tool sketch analysis. And it's saying, hey, something's open, right? It's like, oh, see the cyan circles? So let me click and space. Actually, let me click here and space to deselect. Notice it's telling us, hey, there's something wrong here. So we actually have to remove this portion of the circle. Okay, so we have a closed circle, but we have an open rectangular keyway. So let's go ahead and close this. Click and space to deselect. So we're going to use the eraser. Click on Quick Trim. To remove this portion of the circle. And there it is. Now if you can't find the eraser, go to Insert, Operations, go to Relimitations and go to Quick Trim. Okay, so that's another way to get to the eraser. Okay, let me click and space to deselect. Alright, so just as a sanity check, let's do a tool sketch analysis. And now everything's closed. Everything looks good. Okay, let's close sketch analysis, exit. Okay, let's click and space to deselect. Okay, so now we're ready to create our pocket. Okay, so let's create a pocket using Sketch 3. And we can say, hey, we wanted to go all the way to last. It'll cut through the entire solid. Hit preview. So by selecting the option up to last, it goes through the entire solid. Okay, if it's not creating the pocket for you, maybe it's going in the wrong direction. Maybe it's reversed. Oh, even though it's reversed, it still goes through the entire. Okay, so notice the pocket is going in this direction when it should be going in the opposite. You can always click reverse. Oh, not reverse side, my mistake. Reverse direction. That'll cut through. All the way through. Okay. Alright, so there's our keyway. Now, you just saw me accidentally click on reverse side on the pocket. If I go back to pocket, and I say reverse side, watch what happens when I say reverse side. Hit OK, so it does the opposite of the pocket. Notice the pocket now is a solid and it removes everything around. It's rare, but sometimes you do use that option. It's rare, but it's there just in case you need it. Okay, let me say reverse side. And OK. All right, so let me go ahead and double check, make sure everything's good. All right, so it looks like we have everything covered. Looks just like the isometric view. And we are actually done. So let's go ahead and save our file. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and File, Save. And I'm going to save it on my flash drive. And I'll save it in my CAD31 folder, Chapter 4. Save it as an extra credit assignment. Okay, if you want to put extra credit at the end, it's up to you. Go ahead and save it. And we're done. Okay, so that's the end of this extra credit video. See you in the next one.